But I think actually what we're seeing ultimately is there's $100 trillion of sovereign debt, and and that's denominated in fiat currencies, and one has to ask themselves if those are the instruments for the next 50 years.
The US dollar index is down over 12% this year. All the while, Bitcoin has rallied over 270%, and Bitcoin's search volume reaches for a new yearly high. Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we have a very important topic, because in today's video, we are going to be talking about the reason that Bitcoin has just entered and will continue a Bitcoin bull market, and that comes down to one big idea. That is the debasement of currency and the accumulation of sovereign debt. In the clip you just saw, the CEO of Circle discussed how over $100 trillion worth of sovereign debt have been accumulated. The US dollar and many other fiat currencies are in the process of losing their value, and in this video, we're going to be discussing why that is so very important to you and to the future of Bitcoin. Guys, I think you're going to get a lot of great value out of today's video. If you do, as always, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. But without much further ado, guys, let's go ahead and dive right on into it. My hair is all over the place today. What the freak? Anyway, for our sponsor for today's video, I want to thank Bybit. Guys, Bybit is the cryptocurrency exchange that we personally recommend for advanced traders in the cryptocurrency space. They have great customer service, a very intuitive user interface, and a massive support team if you need any help. I highly encourage you to sign up with our link in the pinned comment down below. If you sign up with that link, you will be helping to support this channel. Thank you very much. Remember, leverage trading is for advanced traders only. Anyway, guys, we need to go ahead and jump on to the charts. And the reason is because we need to talk about where Bitcoin is heading, and then we're going to jump back into the fundamentals. As we talked about in yesterday's video, we discussed how Bitcoin moved into a bull flag here over Christmas. On Christmas Day, we began a breakout and rallied all the way up to $28,400. The question on everyone's minds now is, where is Bitcoin going to go from here? Before I answer that question, I want to make one thing very known, and that is that this is a very precarious time for Bitcoin. It's uncharted territory that we're moving into. We've never seen Bitcoin trade at $26,000 before. More or less every single day, we're setting a new all-time high. It's very difficult to make predictions here. One prediction that you might be thinking of is, does Bitcoin go to $30,000? It's a nice, big, even, round number that we can kind of sink our teeth into and perhaps make a prediction about. But the important thing you have to remember is that we have not been here before. For the last 3 years, we've been below $20,000. And it was easy to figure out what our resistance levels were because, well, Bitcoin had stopped it somewhere before. $20,000, $17,000, all of those were important levels. With that said, in yesterday's video, I discussed the possibility of Bitcoin trading sideways and slightly to the downside, or having a large break to the upside followed by a somewhat significant correction. I want to touch a little bit more on that first possibility, and then we're going to jump into those fundamentals we discussed in the video's beginning. I think it's important for us to understand that Bitcoin is not in the same position today that it was at the end of 2017. At the end of 2017, Bitcoin was at the end of a bull market. It had exhausted itself from bullish exuberance. We are not in that same phase. In fact, looking back on the last 3 years of Bitcoin's history, we can see that while Bitcoin is having a massive, massive rally, it doesn't so much look like the end of 2017, but in fact, it looks a lot more like one of the initial rallies that Bitcoin used to push above the previous all-time high set in 2013 of $1,300. But a very important thing happened after both of these highs, where Bitcoin broke all-time high for the first time in the beginning of 2017. We had large corrections, one and a second. Both of these corrections might look small from a bird's eye view, but they pulled back Bitcoin 37% and 35% respectively. But the important thing to note is that Bitcoin went on a massive rally, 2,000% in less than a year to follow. So guys, you need to understand something. I do believe that Bitcoin's about to go quite a bit higher. It may not happen this month. It may not happen in January. It may not happen in February. But I do think at some point in the next 3 months it's going to happen. But when it does, it is inevitably going to correct, at least somewhat. We're talking between 10 and 20% most likely. When that happens, I want to inoculate you now. Don't get freaked out. It's a good thing. It's a time to buy more Bitcoin. It's a time to make up for those purchases that you missed out on. I have tons of Bitcoin that I bought down at $7,000 that is up over 300% now. I'm very happy that I made wise investments back then, but if you didn't do that, when you see those corrections, it's a good time to make up for that. But I want to move on now to what we were talking about at the beginning of this video, and that's the debasement of currency. I showed you the US dollar index in the intro of today's video, and there's a very important reason I showed you this. As you guys know, there have been literally tens of trillions of dollars worth of stimulus pushed through Congress this year, and in doing so, massive amounts of liquidity has been injected into the market. This, among other things, has resulted in around a 10 to 12% pullback in the US dollar index over the last 12 months. Remember, in that same time, Bitcoin is up 270%. When the US dollar pulls back like this is one of the largest pullbacks that we've seen in a very long time zooming out. We saw a similar pullback on the US dollar index in 2017 of about 15%, but before that, we hadn't seen anything like this since 2011. When the US dollar loses value like this, you have to expect the institutions especially, and the wise money in the retail sector to look for places to put their value that hedges inflation, in this case, hedges massive inflation. We're going to be talking about M1 and M2 money supplies in a future video. When these large institutions are sitting on cash reserves and they realize that their cash reserves are losing what amounts to hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars in value every single year because of the debasement of the US dollar, naturally they're going to seek ways in which they can hedge against said US dollar. I hope that makes sense. One of the ways that these companies are doing this is exemplified in Square and MicroStrategy, both of which have put a lot of money into Bitcoin recently. You've heard those news stories. We covered them here on the channel. What point am I making here? The point I'm making here is this. It's really quite simple. The US dollar is taking a hit in its value because of government stimulus in response to the pandemic we've seen this year. When the government prints this much money and injects this much money into the economy, it is going to cause the US dollar over time. It takes a while because economies are very complicated things. Over time, the US dollar and other fiat currencies lose their value because their supply is inflated. Remember that Bitcoin supply is capped for a reason, is to prevent inflation, among other things, by the way. When the US dollar loses value, naturally, the people holding US dollars are going to look for ways to hedge that inflation. Naturally, when the US dollar is losing value, smart money is going to look for ways to hedge against that US dollar, and that drives value to two things. The only two things, maybe three things if you count real estate. There's only really three things that you can use to hedge against inflation. You have gold, you have real estate, like I just said, and you have Bitcoin. They're not making any more land last I checked. Gold is very hard to inflate the supply of. 2% has been the max for the last 70 years, and Bitcoin has a built-in lockdown on inflation in the supply cap and the halving events. But it's really interesting because gold was actually doing much better this summer. It's pulling back now. Notice here, for the first part of the year, it was rallying substantially, and then when Bitcoin started coming in, we saw an inverse correlation where gold has lost around 10% of its value, but Bitcoin is up, respectively, about 200%. You may have noticed also that even though we're entering what looks to be a recession next year, I'm just going to say it, the real estate market actually isn't doing that bad. Why is that? Because we're dealing with a currency crisis, and real estate is one of the avenues that you can invest to help hedge yourself against inflation. It's not as good at doing that as Bitcoin or gold, I would say, but I do think that part of the reason that the real estate market is doing as well as it is because people are investing in it to hedge against the dollar. There is no wonder why Bitcoin is doing so well this year. So tell me in the comments section down below, do you have investments in Bitcoin for the purposes of hedging against inflation? Because I'll be honest with you guys, even though the US dollar index shows a 10% drop, that does not mean that there's been 10% inflation in the US dollar. That is not what that means whatsoever. The inflation hasn't actually caught up yet. There's a lot of reasons in economics that we may actually be experiencing deflation in the US dollar before we see large amounts of inflation in response to all of government stimulus. So make no mistake, it's not too late to do something about the inflation of the US dollar. It hasn't begun yet. If you would like, we can do more on this topic in the future. I will leave you with a statistic from a survey that Deutsche Bank did. 40% of people surveyed saw Bitcoin trading between $20,000 and $50,000 this year, and 12% of people surveyed thought that Bitcoin would be trading above $100,000 before the end of 2021. That is a remarkable statistic considering Bitcoin started this year around $7,000 and our yearly low is in the 3,000s. Bitcoin's trading at $27,000 today, guys. $100,000 doesn't seem as crazy as it used to, now does it? Before we go, I want to ask you, did you accomplish everything that you wanted to do this year? Did you hit your targets for this year? Did you reach your goals? Or did you fall short? Did you do what you set out to do? And if not, do you know why? Because a lot of people set New Year's resolutions, and it's coming to be that time. It's funny, the best month for gyms and personal trainers is January, specifically the first week of January. It doesn't even last that long. New Year's resolutions normally don't last very long at all. But I want to ask you, did you make New Year's resolutions last year, and are you going to this year? If so, tell me what they are in the comment section down below. But I'm more interested to know if you hit your New Year's resolutions for last year. Now, I actually think it's pretty funny because I don't make New Year's resolutions. I make resolutions every single week because I'm in the job of improving myself and growing. But if you didn't hit your New Year's resolutions, maybe spend a little bit of time looking back and thinking why. I'll give you a hint. It probably has to do with you not being dedicated enough to self-improvement. It probably doesn't have to do with someone else being to blame. If you're blaming people, there's an issue. But anyway, guys, that is going to wrap it out for today's video. I do hope you did enjoy today's video. It's a bit more of a serious one. We're going to have some more fun tomorrow, I believe me. But anyway, guys, like I said, that is going to wrap it out for today's video. Before we go, though, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.